And here we go. Hello, everyone. This is Jay Frost speaking to you from, of course, the Masterminds program, the Philanthropy Masterminds series of DonorSearch. If you're not aware of DonorSearch, I hope you'll take a look there at some of the services they offer. We are so grateful to them for sponsoring this series, where we get to have the top people in the field of fundraising and philanthropy speak to us about what they know and share their suggestions for how we can do much better at the work we do. We're certainly going to have that today in a presentation on making the ask for introverts. And as somebody who falls into that category often, at least most of the time, I know this is particularly useful for many of us who don't necessarily run out there at the barking dog, as one of my friends in fundraising would say, but instead needs to find the best way to take their personality and resources and knowledge and apply it to the task of raising major dollars. And we have the perfect person to talk about that with you today. But before we go there, I just want to give you a couple of suggestions for how you can participate. We can't see or hear you because we're using a platform that doesn't allow for that. This isn't Zoom, but we do want to hear from you. So we encourage you to use the Q&A, which you'll see on your screen, to list any question at any time during the presentation. We'll be looking for those questions, and I'll provide them to our presenter at the conclusion of the presentation. If there's something that's really a burning issue, I'll gently introduce myself so that she'll have an opportunity to address it then. But otherwise, we'll store all those up, and we do want to hear from you as those questions occur to you. So please don't wait. Don't hesitate. Give them to us as they occur. The other thing I want to encourage you to do is at the conclusion of the presentation, there'll be a little survey, and that will let you tell us what you think, not just of this presentation, we'd love to know that, but also about what we should be doing in this series. This is designed around your needs and interests, and that means the only way we can do that properly is to hear directly from you. So please do let us know what you think, and tell us what you'd like to see in the future. And we're going to have this series really blown out in a pretty big way in the weeks ahead. You'll see all that calendar over at donorsearch.net or by signing up for the newsletter from DonorSearch, where you'll see all these different things, the blogs, the podcast, of course, the webinars like today and webcasts, all listed in that calendar for you. But tell us what you want to see, and we'll make sure it ends up there for you to enjoy in the weeks and months ahead. Now, in terms of today's presentation, as I said a moment ago, we have making the ask for introverts, and you can already see on the screen right here is Kenna Barrett. Dr. Barrett of Pitch Perfect Coaching, and she's going to be sharing with us from her vast experience in this era. So I'm going to just give you a little bit of a brief on her background and then get out of the way and let her work her magic with you today. She is a fundraising strategist based in Silver Spring, Maryland. And over a 20-year period, she's raised millions of dollars in all types of organizations, from startups to world-class universities. She teaches fundraising at Sacred Heart University and is director of the APMA Educational Foundation and director of development for APMA. She's passionate about bringing the power of philanthropic asking to people of all personalities, backgrounds, and learning styles, something that we've talked about a lot in this series, but we rarely have a chance to talk with someone who knows it better than almost anybody else in the field, and we have that today. Dr. Barrett, thank you so much for being here to present. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jay, and thanks to all of you who are tuning in right now. Absolutely. So a little bit about myself to amplify what Jay just said. I have worked in big organizations, but I've also worked in very small organizations, and I would love for what I'm going to talk about today to be relevant and feel relevant to all of you. So please do add your questions or comments as we go along. And even if I'm giving examples of some larger universities and how things work, I will always be interested in thinking how we can translate that to people who represent associations and organizations of all sizes. That's really important to me. And yes, this topic is near and dear to my heart. So I am working on an Introvert's Guide to Fundraising. I'm just going to manifest that for all of us at the moment. So just a little bit more about myself for you. And so why in the world are we doing this? So I obviously, as you might guess, identify as an introvert, and I learned how to do individual fundraising after some years doing grant writing, which is a little bit more of a place where some introverts might think they feel pretty comfortable. You know, you get to focus on the writing, and the one-to-one stuff is a little bit different. But when I was working at Yale, I looked at all of the individual fundraisers and thought, wow, I'm not sure I could do that. And even the person that ran Principal Gifts seemed very sophisticated, and he had some golf clubs in his office. And I thought, gosh, people just drop by and hit the links, and you know, he raises millions that way. And you know, then I had an opportunity to do high-touch individual fundraising, and I found that it was it really exceeded my expectations in how exciting it was, and that you didn't have to be a certain type of person in order to be successful. So I wanted to bring some tricks, I guess, of the trade to all of you here today. So, well, what is an introvert? So I really love this definition, which was done at my alma mater by somebody who must have been doing this for a while, Jonathan Cheek, because I think I heard of him when I was a student there, and that was a bit of a while ago. And he has just come up with some other colleagues, sort of an example of how you have subtypes of introvert. I think the thing we hear about is really what he calls a social introvert. Those are people that they just get their energy from being by themselves. They can be in groups, but they like to wind down, and they need downtime after doing that. So that's one type. Then he says there's the thinking introvert, which is the person that has a rich phenomenological experience, rich inner life. They're sort of always thinking through things, like that type. And then the other subtype, anxious introvert, which is the shy people that you might actually kind of enjoy being around people, but it makes you a little bit anxious, so you maybe do it less than you might want to. And then inhibited restraint, those are those processor types. You might have, hear them in the DISC personality analysis, the cautious types that maybe think over what they're going to say or feel like they're slow to warm up. But, maybe once they do, they have a lot to talk about. And so I actually identify with all of those subtypes. But I want to tell you that introverts can and should pursue careers in high-touch philanthropy. And why is that important? Well, it can foster a couple things. It can foster career advancement. As we all know, giving by individuals is the biggest type of giving that there is. It's right now around 70% of all charitable giving. And then, so of course, it's a cornerstone of most development programs. So if you are looking to advance in the field, it's really important to have some experience with that. My message is don't let that daunt you. And so somebody called Sherry Quam-Taylor found that in a recent study, the top challenge preventing development directors from pursuing major gifts was not feeling they had the knowledge to do that type of fundraising. So it wasn't just we don't have the resources or the information on the donors. It was really like, gosh, I'm not sure I know how to do this. So there's a lot of that out there. So you're not alone, but we can do this. And what Quam-Taylor says is really relevant to how I'm going to talk about this. The most successful fundraisers don't have to be expert at working the room. They are the ones that work diligently step by step. And so we're going to talk about how to do that in a way, how to break down and really reverse engineer the qualitative side of working with individuals and individual giving, and it's sort of the soft skills that you need. And then the other thing is personal growth. I actually learned a lot and felt like I really got a lot out of my work as an individual gift fundraiser. And one of the things was you develop your ability to do schmoozing, which I think of as a pleasant conversation toward a goal, right? It's not just chatting and it's not just transactional, but you're kind of working to get to know somebody, maybe for a business purpose or common reason, and that you can kind of apply to all areas of your life, even your career or even your personal life. So that has been something valuable for me in terms of learning how to do this kind of work. So let's just talk one more slide here about the myth of the Hollywood fundraiser. So again, it seemed to me when I started that I held some of these myths in my head, ladies who lunch, guys who golf, and I know it's sort of deliberately gendered here, although there's a young man at that lunch table there, someone who's sommelier just loves to talk about fine wine, and then all those wonderful people networking that look like they're having the best time. And I'm here to say that doesn't have to be the model, and most times it's not the model of how fundraisers work. And even Gerald Hannes, who's been a legend in this field, who writes really accessible books that we've all, I think, benefited from, talks about successful fundraisers and mentions that they have presence or energy, which I think, maybe that is true of some of them, but really you can cultivate all the traits that you're going to need to be a successful fundraiser. So who are the real fundraisers? So that's a picture of our town, a Thornton Welder play, just to kind of symbolize that it's all of us, right? It's all of you out there doing this work. And again, whether you are someone raising money for the Scouts or for your child's school or for any other reason, if you're an executive director or a board member, we are all the real fundraisers. So the survey by Beth Breeze, who really wrote a wonderful book called The New Fundraisers, that explores what are these people, who are these people that have been facilitating all this philanthropy for all this time. And she did a survey, and she did find that professional fundraisers tend to score higher on measures of extroversion, but I would take that with a grain of salt because these were self-reports. And also, very importantly, the patterns identified are clearly not present in every fundraiser. So she goes on to qualify that. And then really, of course, all of you out there that, you're not a major gift officer or development director. 58% of executive directors spent between a quarter and 3/4 of their time doing fundraising. And then, of course, a large amount of organizations require board members to fundraise, and then probably even more hope that they will fundraise. So there's just a lot of us out there. We come in all personality types. So how can we do this? How can we thrive in a relationship-driven field like individual fundraising? And my contention is going to be that we have to use what I call the process method, and I will describe this for you as we go along. So it's interesting. Matthew Pollard wrote a book recently that you may want to check out. It's called The Introvert's Edge: How the Quiet and Shy Can Outsell Anyone. And he also identifies as an introvert, and he talks about this idea that extroverts might sell on their personality, but the rest of us have to go through the process. And he talks about creating a sales checklist for entrepreneurs and small business owners, other introverts that he works with, and even to the point where the checklist had topics for small talk, so that you kind of had these things you could chat about with anyone. It could be as basic as the commute or the weather. And he says something here that I think is really important for us. Says, we introverts usually dread chit chat. Being spontaneous and opening up is like pulling teeth. And then with his plan, we took the spontaneity out of it. And I think that rings true for me, especially if you're one of the reserved type of introverts where you have to think about what you're going to say. If all of a sudden you're supposed to come up with something on the spot, it could be a little bit daunting. It kind of filters into why we think we won't like these kind of interactions with people, or we get worried about them. And so the more you can practice and the more you can have these already ideas that you're going to use, the less spontaneous and maybe the less problematic it can be. Okay, wait, if you're on this, you logged on and you're like, wait, I'm an extrovert. What do I do? Well, this process approach will really help anyone. And even I've heard extroverts say it helps them too, because sometimes they have opposite problems with really just, being too focused on the sale, as it were, and less about listening and less about focused on the donor or the person across the table. So everyone can benefit from going through this. So when I was at Johns Hopkins as a development director, we had a meeting with all the development team across the university, and I think it was like over 300 people. These are some really big development shops, and we had Professor Kathleen Sutcliffe come in and talk about her research, and it was so fascinating. It was something I really took to heart, looked how could I incorporate this stuff in my own work and in my own training and managing. And so she studied what she calls high reliability organizations. And these are organizations, maybe healthcare groups, that they just had very few medical, failures. And it's kind of, it's easy to measure, straightforward to measure medical, mistakes, operating mistakes, or if, someone, incurs further harm, or unfortunately, if you have a hospital death, they can really measure those things very, very straightforwardly. And she found that one main feature of these organizations that kind of cut down on these kind of mistakes is that they're preoccupied with failure, and that helps them create a mindful infrastructure. So this doesn't mean that they're saying to themselves, oh, I messed up again, that stinks. It really just means that they're willing to investigate what went wrong in order to make sure it doesn't happen again. And I want to pause there because, of course, many fundraisers, like, we hate even the idea of failure, right? But like, oh gosh, no, everything went just fine, or oh no, I gotta know, this is horrible. It's really been rare that someone would come back from a visit and say, look, I want to reverse engineer this and see how did this go? How could this have gone differently? And I really want to encourage us to do that. And this was, and to do this in our preparation too before we go to meetings. So there is this thing called foreign object debris walk downs, I understand, that happen on aircraft carriers before you are landing your jet on the aircraft carrier. You have to make sure the whole thing is like clear, because even something small that's there could mess up the wheels landing and so forth. So everyone goes and clears the deck and makes sure that it's ready for that landing. So I've encouraged people, and I do this myself, to do that like walkthrough before you go on your visits. And we're going to look in much more depth about like how that works and what is involved in that. So again, my advice here, as you think about your goals, like as you prep for a meeting, have a meeting and then debrief from it, as not only celebrating what went right, but acknowledging like what didn't go as planned. And that's something for any type of meeting, right? It's not just for fundraising types of meetings. And be vulnerable and open to modifying your behavior as you learn, okay? So here is my take on the process method for making an ask. And so the meme over there is, again, just this like, Ashoka's like very happy to find Baby Yoda because they're both Jedi, so they don't need like checklists for anything because they can use the Force, and it's really cool. And if you're not a Jedi and you can't use the Force or just go on instinct, then here are some steps you can take to really position yourself to do a good job. And not only that, not only like do a great job, but feel better about doing it and feel more comfortable, because that's really where it's at, right? If you are feeling comfortable and you're even starting to maybe enjoy yourself meeting with folks, then it's just a better experience, and it probably will translate to more success, but it's also just a better process for you. So the first thing I want to recommend when you are looking at meeting with an individual, that you're going to gather all the data that you may have on them. And I'm sort of skipping, the pieces about like who do you meet with and how do you figure out that piece. That's a whole other discussion, but let's assume, for this, that you have somebody that you're going to meet with to ask them to support your organization. So big organizations have these wonderful prospect research teams that can go in and provide these custom really reports on donors that'll have like information that's publicly available on their wealth, their assets, maybe their income, and then of course their little formulae to kind of let us know what the capacity of that person may be. And this is really important for me. I really loved getting these reports because it gave me more confidence that I was going to ask in the right range, right? Jen Fila, who's a consultant, points out that like, if you're, our tendency is to meet with people that are kind of like us. But, most of the time, we're not necessarily high net worth individuals. The people we're meeting that we need to be talking to are going to be very different from us in many ways. And so when you have that report in front of you, it's just like, okay, I know I'm in the right zone with what I'm thinking of talking to them about. And then, right, that number that you may be putting on the table is much more comfortable, because certainly if someone came up and asked me for $50,000, that would seem like a lot of money. But for the right person, that's definitely an acceptable ask. So you have your wealth summary capacity analysis. Some organizations do like incredible predictive modeling, giving history. And then even if you're from a small organization thinking, oh my gosh, do I have all that? No. Whatever you're able to find about that person through reports from maybe other board members or affiliates that introduce the person to you, maybe what you can find on Google, like anything that you have kind of help you build your confidence as you go into meeting. And then the 3 I's that I've come up with here So you develop your plan, and this is the soft skills plan that I'm talking about: ice-breaking, inquiring, and inspiring. So some of the things you're going to think through as you're looking at all this, like what type of a meeting are you having? Is this a cultivation, an ask, a thank you? What questions do you want to have answered before you were to go and make an ask? And then of course you're thinking about the ask amount, those kind of things. We'll dig into this in a moment. And then the part that people probably shy away from or run away from, which is you want to role play your plan. Okay, so especially if you have an important meeting, but really just to train yourself, you want to sit someone down or get them on Zoom and go over your talking points and get some feedback, and we'll get to that. And then obviously you will meet with your donor or person across the table, and then you will debrief that. All right, so let's say I have a research report, and the research report that I got from my institution, and here I am using, it's really a composite person. Some of this type of individual I may have worked with, but it's a made-up university, obviously. I'm just kind of a fictitious history here. So what you'd look at, you get this report, and I want you guys to all just take a minute to like look through what we have on this report, and like, what it might tell you about that person. Yes, a lot of numbers. There's a little bit of qualitative information as well. So Jane Hernandez, Podunk U, computer science 97, works at an works IT for finance company in San Fran. And then you have some giving history. You have a visit report, an engagement score, which it could be just a look at like how involved that person has been. So many institutions are starting to do engagement scores, and like some information on they attended their reunions, and they are a volunteer as a mentor to computer science. And then you have the wealth capacity rating I mentioned earlier, and then let's say you just have a net worth estimate and then some other information about their kids. So like, what can you tell looking at this? You know, is this someone that would be a strong prospect, as it were? Was they not so good? Well, when I look at that, you know, I think, okay, this is a person that looks like they've had a really good career. They're doing IT for a finance company, probably a lot of really interesting things they're working on. It. They did something in their major. So that's a great sign, because, you know, obviously that degree really worked for them. And then you also notice something, well, gosh, it's going to be 2022. So my math is right. They're coming up on their 25th reunion. So for those programs that have reunions, that's a big one for people. And this person did attend their previous reunions. And then, you know, the other thing, you could look at their giving history. This is someone that has been very busy with work, but did meet with a gift officer, you know, was happy with some things, maybe not with others. That's pretty typical, right? To have some alumni that are really on board with certain decisions and then maybe not so much with other decisions of the institution. And they haven't been seen in a while. Of course, that could be because obviously of the pandemic, if this is in this, taking place in this universe here. And then, but they did get together with the gift officer. So, you know, when I look at this, I think, well, this is a really good person to go and visit. Okay, so that's what I mean by gathering data. And then, you know, with this capacity rating, again, that can give you the confidence that, you know, oh, they gave 10,000. Well, gosh, like, you know, what the heck do you even ask for? They gave 10,000 5 years ago. Well, if we think that they gave that just out of their own sort of goodness of their heart, and maybe they weren't asked to step up in that way, then you have a sense that maybe this person could do a gift that's closer to where their capacity rating is, because they just went and gave that gift. It doesn't really say either way in this, but often I find that's the case, that sometimes people step up for their reunions, and then in 5 years' time, they're really prepared to do something even more significant. So, so that was the giving history. Then you develop your plan, okay? So again, this is the soft skills plan, really. We're not going to talk as much about like metrics, because we all know those, and there's a lot of talks on, you know, how many visits you should have, what kind of ask, what's your goal. But this is really just like the soft skills list. So you're going to maybe develop some topics that you could actually talk about. And again, for those introverts that you don't really want to think on your feet, I will show you how I actually do that. okay? And then for the inquiring stage, this is the stage in a conversation where you're really asking questions that are going to get you toward an understanding of this person, what motivates them, what would motivate them to make a gift, okay? And you've probably read that about sales, or if you've been to a store and worked with a salesperson, the people that ask the questions first can then really help you more in the end because they know what you want. So I think even Gerald Panis tells a story about like going to purchase a car, and the first person in the showroom is like, oh, we've got this car, we got that car, we got that. It's like, no. So they go somewhere else, and the salesperson is going, well, what are you looking for? What are you trying to achieve? What size car would you like? And they made the purchase from that person because that person was not hard selling them, but was really able to get to. So to get to what they wanted. So this is really the same thing in philanthropy. And it's interesting, again, just to reflect, like, yes, these conversations can be broken down, and that's how you can succeed as an introvert and even as any type of personality. So then that last piece we're going to talk about in more depth, which is inspiring. And this is the piece where the conversation will shift to like, okay, so why are you here? Tell me why you're here. The person across the table may say, enough about me. Tell me about you. What's new with the institution, the school, the organization? And that's where you're gonna come up with a story, really, that brings you into why you're there, why you're inspired, and you will work on some anecdotes and that kind of thing that you can share. And then that last piece, and really the most important, is like, what are you wanting to come away with from this meeting? How are you going to make an ask or lay the groundwork for the next step? So this is the way this plan looks when we write it out. It's linear, it goes toward a goal, and then this is the way that it often turns out in the real world, where you will find yourself in a conversation where you're circling back around to different components of this. But honestly, if you have this in your head, the direction you want to go, and you kind of model that like in your mind while the conversation is happening, then you can get to where you need to go. So, my first job as a fundraiser was for one of the public interest research groups, which is, they get students, college students, to go knock on doors. I don't know how much they're doing nowadays, but they did this a lot back when I was in college. And I had a friend that, he would go, we'd do our little knocks and try to raise some funds for this organization. And then I'd say, how'd it go? It's, well, I just had some great talks with people, but I didn't get any money. So that's an example of just really enjoying the interaction, enjoying the schmooze, but maybe not working on that goal as much. So that's where we want to go, is that sort of sweet spot. Okay, so just drilling into that first step, the ice breaking a little bit more. So why is small talk a big deal? And there was a study by Janice Nadler, who was written up in the program on negotiation at Harvard Law School. And she found that when she put a random experiment and had some negotiators spend 5 minutes chit-chatting on the phone before the negotiation, that she says they felt more cooperative toward their counterparts, they shared more information, they made fewer threats, which is a good thing, hopefully not make threats in our field, and developed more trust in a subsequent email negotiation than did peers of negotiators that did not talk in advance. So that is just one piece of evidence of like why this matters. And the other piece of this small talk that I've used is to build my own credibility. So take some practice, but you want to remember, of course, these donors are in many ways different from us, but we're all people. And that's why people talk about the weather or the commute, because like we all have to suffer / enjoy of those elements of life. So you can use the small talk to kind of just kind of combat that power asymmetry a little bit. And when I teach fundraising all of the time, when I ask students about their attitudes towards fundraising, there's always anxieties. It's just so normal to have these kind of anxieties if you've been thinking about them too. But you might mess up things for your institution, right? It's like hanging on the line there, because the principal agent distinction, the principal is that institution, you are the agent for it, so you don't want to mess things up. Gosh, what would I have in common with these people? Gee, I'm not sure I want to talk about money. So students tend to have all these very reasonable worries. And when you have the small talk, as we found in that study, you find it a lot easier to get to the rest of the conversation. So let's talk about our wonderful prospect here, Jane Hernandez. So let's say I am the solicitor, the development rep, and I'm going out to visit. And what I literally will do is take that well summary and I'll just jot stuff down on it. And, as a writing studies academic, we learned there were studies out there where just the act of writing really helped you with your learning and your memorization. So, it sounds kind of funny, but if you write stuff down, you end up remembering it a lot better. And I think it's even more than if you type it, but that's just me. I don't know if there's data out there on that. But anyway, you want to get stuff out on paper. So let's say, with Jane, gosh, what am I going to small talk about? Well, ask about the traffic. How's the metro going these days? Say I remembered or I knew that she was migrating her company to a new trading platform. And you want to say, how's that going? Maybe I knew she was volunteering somewhere. Maybe I wanted to check in on her kids. So like traffic, work, doing stuff they love, and their kids. Those are some good things that you can always talk about. It's also good to come prepared with something about their organization if they work for a big company or something that's prominent. Like, oh, I saw this article on your company in The Economist. And even the latest headlines, if I was going to New York, I knew they just elected a new mayor. There's lots of other stuff going on in the city. So just, kind of be conversant about all that. I always like to chat about my commute. One time I was going to New York and there was a lot of high-level people I was meeting with. And I was like, I usually just take the subway because I don't like sitting in all the cars and traffic. So like this one time I tried to take an Uber and it was like, I was really late. And of course I was mortified and I walked in and, they were totally understanding because they knew about the traffic and everything. It was like a UN meeting, of course. So that's why. And I took an Uber and the woman, the alumna next to me says, oh, I never do that. I always take the subway, and she was getting some joy out of being a non-elite person, like a woman of the people who takes the subway and, kind of chiding me, even though I mostly take the subway. So, those kinds of conversations can be really generative. And then, of course, this is a no-brainer, but I think sometimes for us introverts, if we're focused on ourselves so much in terms of like, am I coming across okay, we sort of forget to remember and build on that person's interests. So that's something if I'm talking with Jane and she says, oh yeah, the volunteering is going really great. I'm like fundraising for this charter school, you just make a reference or, my son's doing fine, thanks very much. These are the colleges he's looking at, or he's taking a gap year, just remember those kind of things. And then as soon as you are done the meeting, like write them down so you don't forget, because people really appreciate it. I have so many people, oh, thanks for remembering that little detail about me. Okay, and then this is that next phase of the conversation that, again, we think of it linearly, and you're going to prepare in a linear fashion, but it'll probably circle around, is where you want to get to know this person. So I always love to ask, again, this is a university example, but if you're in a nonprofit organization, really, instead of tell me about your time at Podunk U, you're going to say, how did you become connected with this organization? Tell me about that. What have you experienced? You want to get into the experiential mode because they've had so many people that they just love remembering something pleasant about that organization or university they're affiliated with. And it sort of takes them back to memory lane, which is just a good place to be in for setting up a philanthropic conversation. So, my notes would be like favorite professors, again, just getting a sense of that person's connection. And then I have an example person in here, Laurel Barnes, who is, let's say, a leader in the class and who's going to be working on the reunion campaign. So you can kind of ask, drop a few names in there, So if you're meeting with a nonprofit potential donor, like, oh, how do you know the board of directors? Do you know this person? It's really not schmoozing as much as just getting a sense of their connection and who they know. And that can be very helpful because then you know who they know, you go back with that information and you reach out to one of those volunteers and kind of help, help understand that donor a little better. How have you stayed in touch? And then these next two I really love and want you to remember for universities, how did your podunk degree prepare you for your career? And that's really very, very insightful. And you get information on that, and it's both in terms of their connection and sometimes their capacity. So like Jane Hernandez might say, oh my gosh, well, I'm in like a great field and I love my job. And like, I would not have been there if it weren't for my degree in computer science. That's like the best response that you can get. And then I would say, this is something I want you to sort of circle or remember, like the question that you can ask about their last gift or their most generous gift. Always do this one. Thank you for your gift of $10,000. That was so generous of you. What made you make that gift? And you get really incredible insights sometimes. I mean, first, like, people love to be thanked, and they love to feel like, in this big organization, like that meant something, whatever gift it was. If they gave $500, just thank you for that. That was really meaningful. Then most people remember how they gave and why they gave. So Jane might say something like, oh, well, Laura really asked me, kind of twisted my arm about it, so I came up with the gift. And she could even, it was really a stretch for me at the time. But often someone will say, well, I wanted to help the school. I wanted to help the institution. And then, you have an insight. So when you're going to do your spiel, you can kind of weave that in and say, well, I know you, the institution is really important to you. And then that's why I'm talking to you about this new opportunity. So it's a great question to ask. Okay, so now we're into the inspiring phase, and this really could be a whole webinar of, like, how do you, as an introvert, how do you make the case, right? We're talking about making the ask. We'd also talk about making the case. So I'm going to sort of be very high level here, and I realize that you may have lots of questions or could dig deeper, but really, this piece, when it turns to, like, so what brings you here? You want to have a case for support, and that really is a need and a solution, or problem solution framework, right? But you're not going to do it as a monologue where you have a scroll or you're like Hamlet, looking at his ancestor there. And that's not going to be the way you approach it, right? Sometimes for introverts, this can be very comforting to know you don't have to have this kind of sales pitch. But what you're going to do is say something like, well, I was just listening to Dean Jones. Let's say this is Dean Jones. And, she was rolling out her 4 goals for the next year. And, like, the most important one among them was scholarship aid. And, we are working to attract top international students and out-of-state students. And most of them can't come, even though they're so qualified, because they can't afford to. And we want to change that. And we have a goal to raise $1 million for financial aid over the next year so that we can boost our ability to bring these excellent students to Podunk U and really put us on the map and make us known for bringing these international students and students across the country. So you say something like that. And then, you want to talk about those beneficiaries too. So then you can go into, I'm sure Jane, how wonderful the students are. They'll usually say, yeah, well, they'll usually say the students these days are really exciting. Everyone's sort of impressed with the later generation, right? And I used to love the fact that I worked also was the director of corporate and foundation relations in both my university roles, actually. And I had so much to say about, like, different faculty I'd met with to help them with grants, or different students. So you say something like, yeah, I'm talking with some students and they had this amazing outreach program for high schools. And then you can tell them about that. So it's a problem solution, but with your personal story woven in. And I know that's kind of getting through a lot. And it certainly is at a very high level, because what I want to focus on here is really the ask. So this is how I look at the ask. Okay, this is this last piece of it that I mentioned, and it's not just would you consider gift of X, and it's not just you've been a wonderful alum, would you consider gift of X. It's really that story of how that person fits into making this solution really work. And I know that the speaker, I think last week, Russell James, talks about the monomyth and the hero's journey, and this really fits into that. That person is going to want to know, like, how can I help, right, if you set this up nicely. So I write my ask out, actually, here. I type it out often if it's a big case that I'm working on. And there's a few things I want to just highlight if you can look here for a minute. First thing I might say in my, typing out, Dean Jones asked me to visit, because there's some built-in challenges for this solicitor here, right, which is that this person is going by themselves to make an ask. The dean couldn't be there. the volunteer couldn't be there, and that's fine. Oftentimes that's where we are with things, and that's okay. I know it's always said, oh, go with your volunteer. Well, what if you are the volunteer? That's why you're listening to a webinar like this. You want to know how to do this yourself. So this person asked me to visit, makes them feel like the school has them in mind. And then you're doing the little spiel that I took you through earlier. And then you go to that last sentence in that first paragraph that I wrote out. Again, I'm just this solicitor kind of practicing this. I want to make sure I remember to say something about my story. So I benefited from financial aid. Without that support, I wouldn't be, as far along as I am today, just to let them know, like, you care about this, because they're going to want to know that you care. Again, principal agent distinction, that you are really concerned, share their concern for the institution. And then that second paragraph where I say, Jane, you have been a leader for this institution. And that, again, that's a call to leadership. And I would say, you've been one of our most generous alums in your class. And often when they hear that, they think, no. But they forget the 80-20 rule, that so much high percentage of our giving comes from a small group of people. You can kind of remind them, no, it's really an elite group that is supporting the school in this way. And then you're going to go something like at your 25th reunion year, we're talking to a small group of alumni about this campaign. And then I mentioned Laurel Barnes, and this has worked for me in the past. It's really incredible how much people were herd animals. So we want to know what others are doing. And like if Laurel was fine with it, I would mention this because it's worked in the past. I've had someone say, I'd mentioned, well, your classmate is doing this significant gift of X amount. Oh, well, if he's doing it, I'm going to do that too. They've really come out and say that. So it's a really good piece to work. And then in the end, you can, I wanted to ask if you would join Lauren and consider a gift of this amount. You say the amount, right? You'd say consider a gift of $100,000. Okay. And so this second last piece, role playing your plan. Okay. So I have a role play that I'm going to share with you on YouTube. If you would like, I would ask that you just shoot me an email. I will put that up on my YouTube account. I know today Jay and I discussed that we want to hold off on it because sometimes when you play videos through these kind of webinar systems, it just doesn't come across the right way. But I will let you know. You have my word. You go check it out as of tomorrow. And my good friend, fellow consultant Greg Rideout, and I got on a Zoom call. It's what I would encourage you to do. And I said, let me go through my talking points. And Greg, I'd like you to give me some real feedback. And so he did. So I went through my talking points that I just relayed. I didn't cheat. I didn't look at them on screen. I just tried to make a pitch, right? And he gave me some feedback. And it was really incredibly helpful. And I learned a lot. And by the way, like if you watch yourself on Zoom, you'd be surprised what you uncover about like what you do really well and then what you want to tweak a little bit. And I went through it like in one piece. Now, when you're really doing this, as I mentioned, that the donors will jump in and it will be more of a conversation. But I found if you can really memorize what you're going to say, then it's a lot easier to stay on track as you're moving forward. So we kind of went through it, and then we did our little FOD walk down where, he kind of gave me some pointers. And then my advice to you in this section is, monologuing your ask may seem contrived because that's how I'm saying that it's not going to happen that way in the real world, but it gets that schema into your head so that for the real conversation, you can just get things out and it feels a little more automatic, right? It's like practicing for anything. So we did do that. You have my word. And so we'll just go to the next slide here. Okay, so the meeting. So what I'm happy to answer in Q&A, once you go to your meeting, you find a lot of really fascinating things happen. And the big advice I have that was passed on by one of my previous associate deans is to expect the unexpected, right? That's always going to be a guarantee. And I've had all these things I've listed happen to me. And so I've had, person was just nowhere near what I thought they'd be based on the phone or email conversations. Sometimes they had someone that seems completely disengaged. I've been, having pets barking or just, whatnot. And I don't have pets, so I don't, necessarily interact with them all the time. So someone will say, oh, they're really friendly and they'll be just barking up a storm. Of course, we've all dealt with last minute cancellations. I've had people that seem to be experiencing cognitive decline, which I will stop and say in that case, you really do not want to engage with someone along a gift conversation if you think that they're not able to make that, that decision on their own. So that is something important to highlight. And then I've been quizzed by a bankruptcy lawyer about like name the alums in this picture, sort of litmus test. And then of course, unfortunately, sometimes you run into people that have a health issue or something else. Maybe they're going through divorce, and you had this plan to make a big ask, and then you have to think, how do you, how do you go from there? We've all had someone that offers a preemptive gift that might be just, a very different gift than what you were going to talk about. You've had the meeting that's cut short where you haven't gotten your part in at all. They say, oh, very nice to talk with you. Well, I'm afraid I've got to go back to a client. And you're like, why haven't you been? No, I've got to ask you for money, but that's not what you're going to do. You're going to roll with it. I've had venues where you could barely hear anyone. I had a gentleman who always brought his business partner to these meetings that we thought were going to be about his personal philanthropy. And then finally we decided that that's how he rolled, and that it was okay for us to talk about his personal philanthropy, even though his business partner was always there. And then of course, after you get through your ask or your conversation, then you're going to debrief, talk about what went well, what other questions could I have asked, and how could my storytelling have improved. And I want to leave you with this example from Atul Gawande, who's an MD, who is a surgeon, and he's also a very great writer. And he decided to get a coach one day. And he said, why is it only like sports people that have coaches? And although many of us are working with coaches too, but in general, right, that's what you think of as with coaching. He said, I'm a surgeon, I need a coach. So he gets his old professor to give him all these notes, sits in the OR with him, and then he found that he was able to implement these notes and feedback that he got, and his complications rate had gone down. But also he describes that like the way he was draping the patients made it so his medical assistant couldn't always see like as well to do the procedures, so had to kind of move over. And he just, once he realized that, he was able to just adjust so that like everyone, his whole team, had better surgery and better experience. So those kind of things are important for any profession. He says something that I think really translates well to us too. He says, talk about medical progress and people think about technology. What ultimately makes the difference is how well people use technology. We have devoted disastrously little attention to fostering those abilities. And I think too, in fundraising, we have all this data all of a sudden, right? It's burgeoning, and we have research on consumer decision making. We've got so much out there, it can be paralyzing. And you say to yourself, how do I use this? And the goal of this kind of a talk is to get us thinking about like how we incorporate that, and really how we focus on ourselves and on that other person, and what skills we need to acquire to do a good job with just having a pleasant conversation, making that person feel supported, and then making an ask. So my whole thesis here is that introverts can do it. We want to devote attention to fostering our ability to connect with others toward the goal of increasing philanthropy and making a difference. So that's what I'm here to talk about today. I'd love to hear your questions. I'd love to know like how this may translate for you in your own experiences. So I'll stop there, and I'll just ask Jay to let me know if there's questions.
Thank you so much for all of that. I know I have questions too, but first, let's see if anybody else does. And please go ahead and list any questions, or for that matter, any comments in the Q&A section. You should see that right there on your screen. It's the perfect time to do it. And if you're an introvert, like some of us are, feel free to use this as that opportunity to maybe make that little bit of stretch, because this is a great time to get that feedback that maybe it's difficult sometimes to get. And as people might line up some of those questions, I did want to say that this piece you said at the very end, there was a lot of this that was wonderful, but this piece about the debrief was so interesting to see that through the lens of the surgeon getting that coaching. Because I wonder how often, even though there's a lot of coaching and fundraising, I don't see it applied to the debrief virtually at all, and certainly not across the entirety of the team. And you just referenced research. There are so many cases where the prospect development crew, if there is one at all, is in a different building or a different zip code. and the people who work on IT are over here, and the people who work on marketing and social media interaction with our donors are over here. And even if they're not physically in different places, they don't debrief on these things. So this is almost a magical piece of advice. Are you seeing a lot of people take to that? Are they using the surgeon example to think differently about their work and how they share?
Well, I would like them to, and I think particularly as introverts, it's hard for us, right? And it's hard as development people. We're perfectionists. We're supposed to do things exactly right. And if we come back and something didn't go as planned, who are we going to even talk to? So I would like to see people saying to themselves, wait a second, this surgeon kind of came and was open enough and vulnerable enough to say, I had someone coach me, even though I'm supposed to be this expert surgeon. So we certainly can too. You know, no matter where you are in your learning trajectory, is you can get someone to help you, be it a colleague or someone even, you know, that you report to even. I know that can be a little scary. Someone that reports to you, sometimes they won't always give you that direct feedback. They'll say, oh, sure, boss, you did a great job. But even a friend, just get on a Zoom call, right? It's easier than ever. And I would say as a profession that we want to be open, because if I hadn't had the training, you know, that I was fortunate enough to get, my one institution where I started individual giving, I wouldn't know how to do this. And I remember pulling up some people that had real knowledge of sales and were in fundraising and saying, how do I make a phone call to, you know, to ask someone to meet with me? And we went through the whole thing, but it was a little bit of a process because I expected that I was supposed to know it. So we had the ability to be vulnerable, and that was really important. I certainly do think as a field that we need to do this both before and then after we have those meetings.
Right. These shouldn't be state secrets, but somehow sometimes they seem like they are. We have a note from Nikita who says, this is so helpful. I'm the lone fundraiser in my city, and I go on meetings by myself. And so I don't have the opportunity to improve my storytelling or improve my style. How do I get that support, that coaching? Yeah,
I think that's such a great question. And, you know, sometimes what you can do is you can join a professional association and just, you know, meet some colleagues. I am, now that the pandemic is, knock on wood, winding down, you know, we'll be going out there to do these kinds of role plays so that you can do a live role play. I do this with my students where I'm like, nope, let's ask for money. And they're like, oh my gosh, but they go through it. I ask them questions, they get through it. And it's really important. So I would say, you know, joining associations, you know, feel free to reach out to me. And then also just friends, if you know anyone that is in fundraising, or even you could practice on a friend or family member, that can be generative as well. I think it's just that taking that first step of, yes, I'm going to let someone see my pitch, which I have in the video I'm going to post. And it's kind of funny because it's like, it's sort of late in the evening for me. So, you know, it's really just a first time through, and I want everyone to feel open to doing this. You have to, you know, you have to get that feedback. But yes, I empathize with you, you know, in those small shops. I think those small shops have to band together and help one another.
Absolutely. And you did reference the video again. So how can people learn more about the video? Should they contact you this way? What's the best way to reach out to you about that?
Sure, absolutely. You can contact me through my email address, and maybe, Jay, when we're done, I can provide that link if you want to send it out to people with the recording.
Okay, wonderful. And just these slides were terrific. Is that something you're willing to share as well, the slide deck from this presentation? Great, thank you. And if anybody else has questions, let me know. But in the meantime, I did want to ask you, you made reference to in all the different kind of the unexpected things that you have to expect that happen. I have to ask you about the preemptive gift. That comes up so often when I talk to people about how do I, you know, what do I do when somebody just starts pulling out an envelope? Do you have any thoughts on that? How have you responded to that kind of thing? Or maybe any other kind of worst case scenario and how you turn it around that might be helpful?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think, you know, one thing that was sort of seared into my head is always stick with your ask. And, you know, that of course, there's always exceptions to every rule. But if they give you something that's just much different than what you wanted to do, I think you can say, oh, my gosh, you know, thank you so much. That's so generous. And, you know, this will be really important for us. And I think, you know, to be honest, what I was hoping to talk to you about was helping think through, you know, something that could be potentially transformational for you and for the institution. And I was wondering if we could, also have that conversation. And then, you're kind of seeing what they say, and then you're saying this gift could be part of that, or it could be something different. And, sometimes I had someone come back, they came back with a $100,000 preemptive gift. And this person said, here's $100K. Oh, wow. I just haven't visited with anyone recently. So here you go. But I'd still love to talk to you about what you have in mind for me. So sometimes the preemptive is just more of like an appreciation gift if you get lucky that way. Other times it is like, here's my gift and that's all I want to do. And, honestly, sometimes that's the reality and we have to go with where that person is. But it doesn't mean that you stop working with them or kind of sharing that vision.
You also talked a lot about preparation, and I guess both through the lens of that, the more introspective fundraiser, the person who really likes to be prepared before they go out there instead of just sort of flying by the seat of their pants. And but I'm wondering if there's anything that sometimes has been particularly challenging for you as you've tried to navigate that. You mentioned, for example, a loud space. One of the things that I've tried to do is see if I can make sure meetings don't occur during meals, because for me, that's what I find distracting. When people are eating, it's hard to keep on task. But how have you dealt with that kind of thing where the environment itself becomes disruptive? Does that ever throw you off script, and how do you get yourself back on?
Yeah, sure. And I think for me, that mantra that I repeat of expecting the unexpected really helps me to like know that that's okay, because you'll get that spike of like, oh my gosh, I can't hear anything. I don't know what's going on. Right. But then you say, okay, that was my unexpected, and I can just move forward rather than getting fully thrown off. But yes, the more, you can control the environment. I think when I was starting out, I didn't feel like I could kind of say, let's not meet here, let's meet there. But absolutely, the more that you can kind of set things up in a comfortable way that works for you, then that's a great approach too.
Right. And I know that you also talked about something else earlier that I wanted to ask you about because it was so fascinating, about foreign object debris, where you talked about kind of clearing the runway so you don't run into stuff. And how much of that is the preparation we do, and then how much is some other kind of cleanup that you have to do, perhaps with others? Is there some element of preparation where we can do the equivalent, the analogy of the foreign object debris in our work?
Yeah, and I'm not sure if you're asking this, but I think in the role play too, like if we'd had a chance to go through, you would do like an easy role play, and then you do like a tough role play where that person is throwing out all kinds of objections, because that's really where you're trying to clear the decks. And again, for those people with the mindset of like, I need to know, all the different answers to things as much as I can, at least, that you kind of develop your answers before, so you can expect, to anticipate certain questions and objections and barriers. So, that's how you can approach it. Really, again, just that importance of getting colleagues, finding them, making colleagues, building connections to talk through these cases is really, really important, and will strengthen your organizations as it strengthens your knowledge base.
Wonderful. And I know that some of that will be touched on in that video, which will be such a great supplement to what you've shared here. We were asked if people could receive the PowerPoint, and I'm sorry that wasn't clear earlier. Yes, we'll make sure that you all have access to the PowerPoint. I'm not sure if that's going to be through the email that will come to you afterwards, after the presentation. I think that's the venue, but we're also going to take a recording of this presentation and place that on the YouTube channel, which is now being built out by DonorSearch, so you can look for that, both a follow-up email and that repository of videos, because we have 500 that we're in the process of taking in one form or another and loading back and making available to you in the weeks and months ahead. But this one obviously will get special attention because these issues are so important to all of us. Our thanks very much to you for coming and presenting today. We really appreciate you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Yes, thank you all for being here with us today. Please do complete the survey at the conclusion of the presentation today, so we'll know what you want to hear and see in the future. Also, watch through your email for other email from DonorSearch, which talk about the things that are coming up on the calendar ahead. We have a session that's going to be occurring 2 weeks from, I think it's today, that you'll learn about in a few days, plus an episode of the Masterminds podcast, which is going to be released next week. So lots of content coming your way, but we do want to form that around your needs and interests, so please fill out that survey. If you're interested in learning more about DonorSearch, of course, you can do that either by just visiting their site at donorsearch.net, or there's also a little link down at the bottom of your page here where you're visiting today to learn more about their services. So one of the things that, of course, we learned about as we were listening today is about knowing something about your donors, so you can do that prep work. Not all of us have researchers and prospect development teams in our offices. DonorSearch is one of those companies that's taking its time and energy and resources to the task of trying to make sure we understand our donors better. So I hope you'll take a look at what they have if you're interested in knowing more about your donors. Thank you to all of you. Thanks again to our presenter. We'll look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.
Thank you. Take care.